Go back to the story in the 80s and 90s. You know, at this point in time, banking has always been very much a male-dominated industry. You know, how did you find getting into the business originally, climbing so far, so fast, which was a very hard thing to do back then for a lady? How did you find that in the moment at the time? Did you find you were constantly feel like you were fighting battles, or was it fairly seamless for you?
There were battles, and I can tell you a couple that I find funny in retrospect in one aspect, and then also in another aspect I find it humiliating. You know, when you really look back at it and think that that's what you had to go through. But it was also the time. I hate to be so complacent about it, but it was the time, and you did what you had to do. And I wasn't somebody that, well, I was somebody that would be a barn burner and would really raise my hand and say when something wasn't right. And I got in trouble a lot for being too much of an advocate, but I didn't humiliate anyone or really cause anyone to, you know, an example is, you know, when I go out on real estate projects, and this happened more than once, where I'd be inspecting a real estate property, and I'd be there with the investor, and I'd be walking ahead of them or going up the stairs, and they'd pinch my butt. You know, today that would never happen. No. And if I was the person I am now, I would have turned around and slapped them. Yeah. But back in those days, you just kind of turned around and laughed and kind of slapped their hand away. Yeah. But you never would confront them. You would never say, that's inappropriate. Yeah. You know, you just kind of laughed it off because you felt somehow you brought it on.
Right.
You know, that you were too enticing or too free, or, you know, that somehow it was your issue, or that if you were to make a deal out of it, it would have made the situation too awkward, or it would have caused you to lose the client, or it would have caused the bank to think you had done something wrong. It would have been a black mark on me, not on the client. So you just rolled with things like that, and that happened a lot. But it was nothing overt or really harmful. If it had been, then I suppose, I hope, I would have taken stronger steps. But that kind of stuff happened a lot. And it happened a lot within the bank. I mean, you know, men were fairly free with how they touched, and you just slapped them away playfully. You know, you never confronted them. And today that would never happen. And if it did, you would be much more aggressive about it.
Well, you know, it's funny, we watch shows like Mad Men, which takes us back to, you know, a slightly different era. And it's amazing today how unbelievable that sort of behavior seems to us sitting here today.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it was the norm back then. I mean, it's a terrible norm to have exist, but it was the norm. And it's, you know, obviously, no one's ever done that to me, thankfully, I guess.
Well, if you'd like, I could show you how it feels.
That would be wildly inappropriate.
Yes.
But it's you don't think of that when you're in a male-dominated industry like banking has always been. You don't think of that when you're a man. You don't see that stuff really going on in the same way. You're too busy and you're too focused on all the stuff going on. But it's, you know, it's only really, I think, for me personally, with the benefit of hindsight and the benefit of seeing retro pieces on TV that try and recreate the environment, you realise how difficult it was for someone like you at that point, who is clearly brilliantly smart, incredibly capable, and fighting every day just to be allowed to have a chance to prove that to people on a level playing field.
And you have to try and suss out the intent. And is it mitigating the respect someone has for you? And usually it is not. And that's really what mattered to me. But I'll tell you another instance, and this was not in the same realm, but this one upset me much more. It was when we were officially starting the private bank, And the chairman of the bank wanted me to take on an existing client that had been in the corporate bank. And it was a group of men that were very prominent, and they had a real estate company, but each of them was a private banking type client. And we were holding a lunch for them and to introduce me. The purpose was to introduce me. And we were holding the lunch, and we were holding it at the Bankers Club in San Francisco, where I was a member, old club up on the top of the B of A building that's no longer there. And we were down in the main lobby of the bank, and there were a few of us standing there talking about hosting this lunch, and this guy walks up who happened to be the grandson of the person that had owned a home that became a private club, a male-only private club, because back in the day, there were still male-only private clubs. And he walked up and he said, "Oh, what are you guys talking about?" I said, "About hosting this lunch to introduce Barbara, blah, blah, blah." And he goes, "Oh, I want to come." And I said, "Fine, you could come if you'd like." And he goes, "In fact, we're going to hold it at such and such club." And I said, "You do understand, I can't even serve you lunch at that club?" And he said, "Oh, that's too bad."
Come on.
And they held the lunch there. And I was like, the purpose is to introduce me. And he just overrode it, and they held the lunch there. And so the chairman of the bank held a second lunch in the board dining room to introduce me.
Wow.
I was just like, I was dismissed.
That's shocking.
It was
Really
just,
shocking.
Yeah. I was stunned.
But does this sort of galvanize you and make you more determined to think, you know what, I'll show you? Or is that kind of too cartoonish? Is it a conscious thought, or you just put your head down and keep working?
I put my head down and keep working. I mean, there was clearly no way I was going to change his mind. None of the other men in that group, because it was all men, none of them stood up and said, "No, we're not going to have it there. She can't come. This whole purpose is to, introduce her." So I realized that this is very much a man's world. None of them are going to come to my defense. That if I'm going to change, I'm going to have to do it on my own and just prove myself and make myself indispensable. And so that's what I did. And thankfully, times changed.
Well, they do, thankfully, yeah. But it's still a long struggle. I mean, it's a
very long struggle, very long struggle.
Wow.
And that's probably why there weren't a lot of women, that were able to do it, because it was not a very favorable environment for women.
Was there any point in time when you noticed a step change? Has it been gradual, or was there anything that happened at some point where you suddenly realized, hey, you know what, things are changing?
A few women started to get into more senior positions at institutions in the early 90s or late 80s. And I think that started to make a difference, but they didn't last long. In the mid 80s, late 80s, they really struggled, and they didn't last long because they would usually run against a male peer, and they would find frustration no matter how it was dressed up. That's usually what it was, and they wouldn't last long. And that's really what happened to me. I ran up against men that really wanted to replace me with men, and no matter how it was dressed up, that's what it really came down to.